In the heart of a dense, shadowy forest stood the remote village of Eldergrove, a place often forgotten by time and seldom marked on maps. It was in this secluded locale that an unsettling incident transpired in the summer of 2009, an event that would ripple through the community like the surface of a still pond disturbed by a stone. The villagers knew each other intimately, their lives interwoven through shared histories and daily routines, making the subsequent changes all the more disconcerting. Eldergrove was picturesque at first glance, with quaint cottages hugged by wildflowers and an air perfumed by pine and earth. However, beneath its serene facade lurked an ominous atmosphere. Whispers of strange occurrences began to circulate among residents, curious murmurs about sudden forgetfulness or moments when conversations seemed to slip away from memory like grains of sand through fingers. These initial signs were subtle enough to be dismissed as simple lapses of concentration, or the daily toll of life in a close-knit community. The first inkling of something truly amiss arrived when Mabel Hartwell claimed that her husband, Thomas, was not who he seemed. Mabel had always been perceptive. She kept up with village gossip and knew when any ember of discord sparked within their tight community. Her claim, however, was met with skepticism. How could anyone replace someone so beloved? Yet as her conviction deepened, her friends noticed her increasingly erratic behavior. Conversations peppered with anxiety and her eyes constantly darting toward shadows as if expecting them to come alive. Days passed, and Mabel's fears escalated into paranoia. She roamed the village seeking reassurance, clinging desperately to fleeting fragments of memories that felt increasingly distant from reality. Then came the day when it all culminated in tragedy. Found in her home was Mabel, lifeless on the floor, surrounded by two identical figures, each one hauntingly mirroring Thomas Hartwell's features but lacking the warmth that made him human. The discovery shocked Eldergrove to its core. Residents gathered at the local tavern, not only to lament Mabel's untimely death but also to share their growing concerns about what had happened previously. The laughter that typically echoed through those walls dimmed into hushed tones filled with dread. Questions lingered thick in the air. How could this happen? Who, or what, had taken root among them? As rumors spread like wildfire, whispers turned into frantic discussions about what might have happened not only to Mabel but potentially to others as well. The villagers began to recount stories from their own homes where small details felt off, missing items that had reappeared strangely placed, odd exchanges during dinner conversations that left lingering unease in their hearts. The sense of normalcy crumbled under this rising tide of fear. It wasn't long before government officials arrived at Eldergrove, a group cloaked in authority and mystery, intent on investigating what they termed unusual phenomena. Their presence brought a flicker of hope for some yet anxiety for others who feared more than just physical danger. They dreaded what might be discovered lurking beneath their familiar facades. These officials took over the investigation with sterile precision, combing through evidence, conducting interviews, and recording testimonials while documenting every nuance of behavior they witnessed during their stay. The atmosphere grew tense. Intrigue twisted with paranoia as villagers weighed their memories against one another amid skeletons rattling in closets they once believed securely locked. Among these documents were audio logs capturing fragments of conversations filled with panic-stricken voices talking about missing people or neighbors behaving differently than remembered, a jarring juxtaposition against laughter now silenced by uncertainty. Surveillance footage revealed chilling scenes. Indistinct figures moving silently across darkened streets at odd hours. Families huddled together yet appearing distant. Shadows dancing just out of reach in flickering light. Within days, Eldergrove transformed from a quiet retreat into a haunting stage where trust evaporated. Neighbors eyed each other warily. Friendships fractured under suspicion as everyone began questioning who might be harboring imposters within their ranks. It was no longer just about Mabel and Thomas, but rather an insidious fear spreading like rot beneath the surface. Despite growing unease among villagers regarding identity itself, a crisis not easily resolved, the investigators pressed on relentlessly until they uncovered reports detailing descriptions that bordered upon science fiction. Shape-shifting organisms capable of mimicking loved ones down to their very fingerprints. One detail remained elusive amidst these revelations. There existed one singular test capable of identifying these imposters conclusively, a sliver of hope buried within an avalanche of horror. But as tension mounted further still, so too did frustration as pages turned blank following hints promising clarity. And just as hope flickered momentarily brighter within despair's grasp, silence fell upon Eldergrove once more, leaving behind questions hanging heavy like fog on a cold morning. What truly unfolded within those remote woods? What horrors lay hidden behind every familiar face? The answers waited patiently beyond reach as shadows whispered secrets ever more hauntingly through sounds unheard. As whispers of Mabel Hartwell's claims began to circulate through Eldergrove, a cloud of unease settled over the village. In the days following her alarming confession, residents became increasingly aware of subtle shifts in their everyday lives, changes that felt too peculiar to be mere coincidences. It started innocently enough, a forgotten name here, an inexplicable lapse in memory there. These minor incidents spiraled into something more unsettling. Old Mrs. Green, who had lived on Maple Street for decades, was the first to exhibit starkly unusual behavior. Known for her sharp wit and vibrant personality, she began confusing the names of her grandchildren, mixing them up as if they were characters in a forgotten storybook. At first, family members dismissed it as age catching up with her. After all, everyone had off days. But when she stared vacantly at her own reflection and muttered to herself about the other one, concern rippled through her family. Meanwhile, young Kevin Riley, a bright boy with a penchant for storytelling, started to recite tales that seemed eerily off-kilter. One evening during dinner, he spun a yarn about monsters that looked just like people but acted strangely different. His parents chuckled nervously, attributing it to his lively imagination. Yet, as Kevin's stories grew darker and more vivid, filled with creatures hiding among them, it became harder for them to shake off their discomfort. The local baker, Mr. Thompson, who prided himself on his bread recipes passed down through generations, appeared distracted during his morning rounds. Customers noted how he forgot orders or delivered croissants instead of baguettes without batting an eye. Each misstep seemed trivial at first, but soon accumulated into a tapestry woven with confusion that hung heavy in the AIR.AT community gatherings. Laughter that once flowed freely was replaced by strained conversations filled with hesitance. The villagers exchanged uneasy glances during even the simplest discussions about crops or weather patterns. Their words carried an undercurrent of suspicion that belied their friendly intentions. Conversations darted around unspoken worries like fireflies flitting through twilight, flickering but never settling long enough for anyone to grasp what was really happening. Among these changes emerged a chilling sense that something, or someone, was watching closely from the shadows. Residents found themselves glancing over their shoulders more frequently. Familiar faces began taking on an alien quality as they noticed slight alterations. The way someone smiled or how laughter came out just a bit too forced. Friends and neighbors became enigmas wrapped in skin they once thought they understood completely. This growing discontent took root most profoundly within Mabel Hartwell's circle of friends. Women who had spent countless evenings sharing secrets over cups of tea now found themselves questioning every word spoken amongst them. When one suggested meeting at the tavern for comfort following Mabel's death, another hesitated before agreeing. It felt strange to gather without addressing the looming specter of uncertainty hanging above them. In hushed tones at those gatherings, discussions shifted toward identifying various signs of abnormality among residents, their initial observations slipping from playful banter into earnest examinations laced with paranoia. They pondered what might be causing these strange lapses: stress? Illness? Or something far more sinister? The air thickened with apprehension as these conversations continued to spiral downward into darker territories. Amidst this commotion came reports from children playing outside who swore they saw figures lurking just beyond the trees, shadows whispering secrets. Only they could hear as laughter erupted into nervous giggles when parents turned to investigate the cause of their frightenments. As days turned into weeks following Mabel's tragic demise, villagers couldn't shake off feelings that extended beyond mere fears stirred by grief. They felt invaded somehow by an unseen force infiltrating their lives and subtly altering their reality until it became almost unbearable. Despite efforts by some individuals attempting to maintain routine, tending gardens or attending church services, an invisible weight pressed upon all aspects of life in Eldergrove like an iron hand gripping tightly around throats, stifling freedom and joy alike. Conversations grew strained under scrutiny. Friendships began fraying at edges where once stood bonds so sturdy they could withstand any storm. A fabric woven meticulously throughout years now unraveling thread by thread beneath tangible tension, suffocating warmth once shared within their quaint village. It was during one such gathering at Mrs. Green's cottage, a place usually filled with laughter, that fear truly coalesced into something palpable when she stood suddenly silent amidst conversation and declared loudly yet hollowly, "They're not who you think they are." The room fell still as everyone exchanged alarmed looks before quickly attempting to dismiss her erratic outburst as another sign of age catching up with her mind. Yet despite those attempts at normalcy crumbling before them like brittle leaves underfoot came an undeniable truth. The unease festering within Eldergrove transcended mere coincidence or forgetfulness. It dug deep roots into fears both ancient and primal about identity itself, a revelation stirring quietly beneath layers built by years. Lived together now, threatening everything held dear within its suffocating grip. As the atmosphere in Eldergrove grew increasingly tense, the focus unexpectedly shifted to Mabel Hartwell, an ordinary woman, yet at that moment, her fears would tip the balance of reality itself. Mabel was known for her warmth and reliability. She baked for bake sales, hosted tea parties, and offered an ear to anyone in distress. However, beneath her cheerful exterior lay a palpable undercurrent of anxiety that had been growing steadily since the peculiar behavior began to infect the community. Mabel's husband, Thomas, was a gentle man beloved by all. He had always been her anchor, a constant support amid life's ebb and flow. But lately, she sensed something indefinable shifting within him. At first, it was nothing more than a whisper of doubt that crossed her mind, Thomas forgetting small details about their shared history, odd glances exchanged with strangers as he seemed lost in thought. But as days wore on and people around her started behaving erratically, that whisper evolved into a deafening scream. Confiding in her friend Ruth during one frantic meeting over coffee, Mabel's voice trembled as she recounted specific instances where Thomas's behavior took a turn for the bizarre. "He looked at me as if I were a stranger," she confessed, her hands trembling around the cup. "He didn't even remember our anniversary last month, and when I reminded him, he just stared blankly like he didn't know what I was talking about." The fear evident in her eyes cut through Ruth's usual demeanor of calm support. It left a weighty silence in place of comfort. Mabel had begun experiencing sleepless nights filled with dread and lurking shadows that turned familiar corners into unknown territories. Her dreams became a tumultuous sea of anxiety swirling with images of Thomas. Only each time, he appeared slightly different, flickering like an old film reel broken at the seams. Whatever satisfaction she once derived from their daily life together now felt like a fading echo. With every passing moment, Mabel felt an overwhelming conviction that Thomas had been replaced. The man who returned home each evening was not her husband but an impersonator skillfully wearing his skin. As impossible as it sounded to her friends, who mostly shared worried glances over cups and muttered reassurances, Mabel could not shake off the feeling that her life was slipping away beneath the weight of an insidious force lying in wait, determined to gather evidence to support her claims. Perhaps hoping to convince herself as much as others, Mabel embarked on covert investigations against the backdrop of mounting paranoia. She stealthily observed not just Thomas but their neighbors too. She documented these changes meticulously in a journal, carving out notes that oscillated between frantic scrawlings and eloquent descriptions of previously mundane moments. Her thoughts spiraled into fevered obsessions, creating crevices where hope began to crumble beneath despair. When she next confronted Thomas about her suspicions in the privacy of their home, his reaction was unnerving. Instead of surprise or confusion at the very notion, an expression she expected, he merely smiled in a way that sent shivers down her spine. "Mabel," he said with an eerie calmness that felt wrong, "you're imagining things. We're fine." Those words wrapped around her like tendrils constricting tighter with each utterance. With no external validation for her fears nor an ally among friends willing to entertain her unraveling insights, Mabel felt increasingly isolated. The realization tortured her. If no one believed her about Thomas, then they might also be vulnerable to whatever insidious presence crawled through Eldergrove's shadows. As desperation morphed into dread, Mabel increasingly sought solace in late-night walks beneath the veil of darkness, her only companion being the cool breeze whispering through the trees. These moments became a refuge where she contemplated conspiracies along deserted paths illuminated solely by moonlight while conjuring up memories of happier times when life felt safe. But one evening, during one such walk shrouded in gloom and silence, everything changed. As she passed by Hollow Oak, the ancient tree known for its gnarled limbs woven with stories of yore, a sudden chill blighted the air. Around her. It was then that she witnessed a sight she could never comprehend. From deep within the shadows stepped two figures identical to Thomas, their expressions frozen in eerie synchrony as if they were trained puppets performing side by side. The weight of overwhelming panic seized Mabel's heart as she let out an involuntary gasp. Staggering backward, reality splintered before her eyes. A nightmare materializing into existence, complete with laughter ringing hollowly through branches above. In that moment, clarity crashed through fear like lightning illuminating darkened skies. She was not merely battling paranoia but confronting something far more horrifying than mere disconnection. It was an invasion posing as love, one that buried itself deeper within cherished relationships until trust itself faded away like morning mist fleeing from dawn. Days later, when Mabel's lifeless body was discovered alongside two identical versions of Thomas Hartwell, whispers transformed into screams, echoing throughout Eldergrove, a profound tragedy punctuated by questions swirling like storm clouds drowning hope, and affirming what everyone feared most, that something deeply malevolent had taken root among them all along. The village of Eldergrove was plunged into a deep abyss of despair when news of Mabel Hartwell's death spread like wildfire through the tight-knit community. It was an ordinary morning when Thomas returned home from his early errands, expecting to find Mabel in the kitchen, perhaps immersed in the gentle rhythm of her baking. Instead, he stumbled upon an unimaginable scene that would forever alter the fabric of their lives. As Thomas stepped inside, a chill crept up his spine. The house felt eerily silent, devoid of the usual warmth that characterized Mabel's presence. He called out for her, but his voice echoed back with a hollow emptiness. Panic gnawed at him as he searched each room, calling her name louder with each passing second. Finally, he found her in their bedroom, lying unnaturally still on the floor, her lifeless body framed by the morning light filtering through the window. What struck Thomas first were the two figures standing beside her, two identical versions of himself, motionless like statues carved from ice. The sight shattered his mind, merging horror and disbelief into a singular moment frozen in time. Each Thomas wore the same worn flannel shirt and jeans, their expressions eerily synchronized. Their eyes reflected a cold familiarity that sent shivers racing down his spine. In the chaos that followed, neighbors rushed to the scene, drawn by the commotion emanating from the Hartwell home. Gasps filled the air as they took in the sight. Mabel's body sprawled lifeless on the floor and two identical Thomases hovering over her like phantoms. Whispers erupted among the gathered crowd, eyes wide with confusion and fear. Grappling with the terrifying implications of what they were witnessing, Detective Harris arrived shortly thereafter. Summoned by frantic calls from concerned villagers, he stepped into the house, taking in the bizarre scene before him with a mixture of bewilderment and resolve. He knew that Eldergrove had been rattled by strange occurrences over recent weeks, Mabel's claims ringing louder than ever in his mind. Yet nothing could have prepared him for this horrifying tableau. "Call an ambulance!" someone shouted, breaking through the murmurs of disbelief. Yet deep down, everyone understood that it was too late for Mabel. She was gone, leaving behind a void that could never be filled. As emergency services arrived and began their protocol amidst anxious villagers, Detective Harris focused on unraveling this grotesque mystery. Questions poured forth as investigators attempted to piece together what had happened leading up to this tragedy. They learned about Mabel's growing paranoia, her assertions that Thomas had been replaced, and how her behavior had shifted during those final days before her untimely demise. Friends recounted tales of her sleepless nights filled with dread and whispered fears that had spiraled into an obsession that consumed her. Amidst investigating Mabel's death, authorities scrutinized the two identical Thomases standing at the center of this dark puzzle. Authorities quickly realized that despite their outward appearances mirroring one another, there was something inherently different about them. A slight tilt to one's head or a flicker of emotion in one's eyes that betrayed an uncanny dissonance between them. As investigators pored over evidence and conducted interviews with residents who had witnessed Mabel's unraveling mindscape, fear permeated Eldergrove like an unshakable fog that dulled senses and bred suspicions among neighbors alike. The heart of every villager thudded with unease as they pondered what lurked beyond the edges of their perception, something more sinister than mere human behavior. Days turned into weeks as authorities searched for answers amid growing silence from Thomas, a man now caught between grief and horror so profound it threatened to consume him whole. The investigation revealed troubling reports about sightings of shadowy figures lurking around town. Children spoke of monsters disguised as people whispering secrets beneath trees at night. Tales once dismissed as folklore now felt chillingly real. Amidst this chaos, Detective Harris discovered audio logs from local residents who had mentioned strange occurrences, odd behavior among loved ones, and fleeting memories that vanished like smoke upon waking. These recordings painted a portrait of panic threading its way through Eldergrove, a tapestry woven from threads of fear that seemed to tie everyone together in dread. Then came whispers about shape-shifting organisms capable of mimicking loved ones down to their very fingerprints. Stories previously relegated to fantastical tales suddenly felt too close for comfort within this context. The idea slithered through Harris's thoughts as he pondered not just how Mabel had died but how many others might unknowingly harbor imposters masquerading beneath familiar facades. In time, residents began testing boundaries long believed impenetrable. Laughter turned hollow as friendships frayed beneath scrutiny where trust once thrived unconditionally. They questioned who might harbor secrets hidden in plain sight while grappling with growing paranoia shadowing every interaction. Familiar faces now cloaked in uncertainty warped by circumstances beyond reason. The revelation surrounding Mabel's death became a haunting reminder echoing throughout Eldergrove. Reality was not merely slipping away. It had transformed into something infinitely more sinister lurking just beyond reach, a darkness waiting patiently until it could swallow them all whole. As the unsettling events in Eldergrove unfolded, it was only a matter of time before the government took notice. Reports of Mabel Hartwell's death circulated far beyond the village borders and reached the ears of officials who were already on high alert due to rising concerns about unusual phenomena occurring across the country. With whispers of strange occurrences and the notion that perhaps something supernatural was at play, they felt compelled to act swiftly. Within days, a team of specialized agents arrived in Eldergrove, cloaked in an air of authority that both unsettled and intrigued the villagers. Clad in dark suits with badges that gleamed ominously under the gray skies, these figures moved purposefully through the streets with an intensity that suggested they were prepared for anything. Detective Harris, still grappling with Mabel's tragic death and the implications of her claims, found himself working alongside them as they began their investigation. The agents established a makeshift command center in the town hall, an inconspicuous building that had once been a hub of community life but now morphed into a fortress of scrutiny. Local residents were summoned to share their experiences and observations. Those who had witnessed Mabel's unraveling or noticed peculiar behaviors among their neighbors. The atmosphere buzzed with anxiety as people queued up to speak, some clutching onto remnants of hope while others wrestled with growing dread. Among the gathered residents, rumors spread like wildfire about why government officials were truly there. Whispers hinted at classified operations and experiments gone awry, leading many to believe that Eldergrove had become a focal point for something sinister. The very existence of shadowy organizations lurking behind closed doors fueled suspicions and intensified fears that already hung heavily in the air. The agents combed through every inch of the village. They interviewed anyone willing to speak, delving into personal lives and histories with relentless determination. The focus soon shifted to gathering evidence, collecting audio logs from residents who reported strange behaviors, reviewing surveillance footage from street cameras that captured unsettling activities during the nights surrounding Mabel's death, and documenting any instances where relationships had inexplicably soured. As investigators pored over these materials, it became increasingly clear that something far more insidious than mere hysteria was at play in Eldergrove. One particular log captured a chilling conversation between two neighbors discussing bizarre encounters. "I swear I saw my husband standing outside late last night," one woman recounted nervously. "But when I called out to him, He turned and gave me this look, like he didn't even know who I was. Such accounts fed into the growing narrative that something unnatural had infiltrated their lives. While they sifted through evidence, Thomas Hartwell remained an enigma wrapped in grief. He was approached multiple times by agents seeking insights into his wife's final days and his own uncanny experience with identical versions of himself. Yet Thomas struggled to articulate what he had seen. Every time he tried to recount those moments, he was met with disbelief mixed with pity, the kind meant for someone caught in a web of paranoia. Amidst this turmoil came whispers within clandestine circles suggesting that Eldergrove may have unwittingly become a hotbed for experimentation involving shape-shifting organisms capable of mimicking humans down to their very fingerprints. This notion ignited hushed conversations among both agents and villagers alike. No longer mere folklore but a plausible explanation for the dissection of reality, they all faced. As investigations continued, agents coordinated with local law enforcement to establish perimeter checkpoints around Eldergrove while conducting searches for any signs or traces of unusual activity. They sought patterns among residents' behaviors that might indicate infiltration but often found themselves stymied by a community gripped tightly in fear, struggling against an invisible force warping their perceptions. The tension within Eldergrove became palpable as friendships frayed under scrutiny, the very fabric binding this once close community began unraveling thread by thread. Trust evaporated amongst neighbors as they questioned everything about their loved ones. Eyes darted suspiciously at those who had always been seen as family before this chaos began. As time wore on without resolution or answers, dark clouds loomed over Eldergrove like specters haunting the town's psyche. The government presence served as both a beacon of hope for clarity and a catalyst for further unease, their probing eyes seemingly unearthing secrets better left buried beneath layers of normalcy. With each passing day, investigators grew increasingly aware that understanding what lay beneath the surface would require not just investigative prowess but an understanding steeped in empathy for those caught within this web of horror. As they delved deeper into Eldergrove's mysteries, it became apparent that unraveling one truth might expose another far darker still, one capable of swallowing them all whole if they weren't careful. In light of this realization, those tasked with uncovering the truth faced an urgent decision. Would they unveil what lurked behind shadows lurking in familiar faces? Or would apprehension hold them back from discovering how deep the rabbit hole truly went? The stakes rose higher as answers remained tantalizingly out of reach, teasing them closer toward oblivion where light flickered dimly against darkness. As investigators delved deeper into the haunting mysteries of Eldergrove, the leaked government file unveiled a trove of audio logs and surveillance footage that would send chills down the spines of those who dared to listen and watch. These recordings offered unsettling insights into the minds of residents grappling with burgeoning paranoia. Their fears laid bare in a manner that felt almost voyeuristic. One particular audio log resonated with striking clarity. Captured late one evening, it featured a distressed conversation between two middle-aged men seated outside the local pub. The chatter ebbed and flowed until one of them, Gary, broke through the jovial facade. "Something's not right with my wife, Tom," he said, his voice laced with dread. "The other night she called me Dave, like I was someone else. She looked at me like I was a complete stranger." His tone grew more agitated as he continued. "I keep thinking, what if she's not my wife? What if she's pretending to be her?" The raw vulnerability in Gary's confession stirred something primal in listeners as they grappled with their own suspicions. The way his words hung in the air invoked an unsettling awareness that these fears were shared amongst neighbors who had once enjoyed simple conversations over meals or games. The weight of his sorrow echoed throughout Eldergrove as old friendships began to fracture under the strain of hidden insecurities. In another log, a frantic woman named Linda described an encounter with her close friend. "I saw Jenna last week at the market," she recounted breathlessly. "But when I waved at her, she just turned away and walked into the woods like she didn't recognize me. When I caught up to her and asked why she ignored me, she looked right through me and said she was busy." Linda's voice was filled with both bewilderment and creeping terror, as if she were unearthing secrets better left buried. These audio logs painted a tapestry imbued with whispers of paranoia that permeated every corner of Eldergrove. Each entry deepened the sinister narrative developing around them, Watchful eyes began scrutinizing every smile and greeting exchanged among neighbors. Conversations once filled with camaraderie now folded under suspicions that twisted friendships into shadows. While these chilling audio logs echoed fears within familiar walls, surveillance footage captured unsettling interactions in stark silence. One notable clip showed two groups of friends gathered in a park after dusk. As they shared drinks and laughter, camera angles revealed quick glances exchanged between them. Delicate yet burdened expressions that hinted at more than simple joviality. A flicker here or a nod there suggested an underlying tension, surfacing just beneath the veneer of laughter. Another moment caught on film, a child ran past a streetlight chased by their friend. Laughter rang out and echoed pleasantly in the night air until it abruptly stopped. The camera captured the moment when the child turned back toward their friend with fear etched across their face before darting away toward home. An innocent game transformed into something darker. Those reviewing the footage noted how long shadows seemed to loom behind the giggling figures. A grinning menace hidden within laughter. The most disturbing footage came from a night when Thomas Hartwell appeared on screen, first alone, then alongside his identical counterpart. What should have been ordinary interactions revealed themselves as uncanny reflections lacking warmth or genuine connection. Their movements mirrored each other so closely that it felt like an echo reverberating through time. A disconcerting reminder that something unspeakable lurked beneath appearances. As investigators reviewed these materials meticulously, they found themselves confronted by questions that could lead them deeper into each villager's psyche or across thresholds meant to remain closed forever. How many had succumbed to fancy and hallucinations? How many faced something far more terrifying? A reality where loved ones could switch places without anyone knowing? Each grainy frame raised existential doubts about the very nature of identity. Familiarity became fraught territory, crumbling beneath weighty revelations. The chilling nature of these revelations generated an escalating atmosphere strangled by distrust. As Eldergrove spiraled further into panic fueled by collective paranoia, friendships deteriorated under scrutiny. The very fabric binding them together threatened to unravel thread by thread at any moment. Conversations that were once mundane became exacerbated under layers of suspicion. Neighbors avoided eye contact. Children hurried home past each other, as if sensing unseen dangers lurking nearby. An entire community pulling back from closeness while battling feelings of betrayal and confusion cascading through intertwined lives. As time moved forward without clear answers, illuminating dark corners invaded by uncertainty, deeper truths lay exposed. Threats made flesh now estranged from what had long embodied comfort cloaked in gently shaded memories. Love's embrace had been soured by fear spread insidiously through whispers crackling underneath bated breaths brushing against tender hearts now torn apart, calling for sanctuary rendered hopelessly out of reach. Amid this cacophony of anxiety layered upon everyone yearning for safety sufficient enough to stave off potential loss remained curious. The agents exploring Eldergrove, feeling their way quietly through fragile webs spun from rapidly shifting threads, balancing precariously above dark pits where silence loomed heavy enough suffocate answers long desired, held captive waiting for someone brave enough reveal what lay beneath tangible ease, still resisting inevitable pull drawing them deeper toward obscurity, blending at edges shadowed reality, demanding truth emerge hopeful against creeping dread itself. As the investigation into the events surrounding Mabel Hartwell's death deepened, the government agents uncovered bewildering reports describing a shape-shifting organism that had infiltrated Eldergrove. This creature, unlike any known species, possessed chilling capabilities that struck fear into the hearts of those who learned of its existence. Its ability to mimic loved ones not only blurred the lines between reality and illusion, but also instilled a profound paranoia among villagers. The organism was said to possess a remarkable adaptability, capable of altering its physical form with near-perfect precision. It could replicate not just the outward appearance of individuals but also their mannerisms, voices, and even subtle expressions that conveyed emotion. Each mimicry was so flawless that it would take an intimate knowledge of a person, something only close family or friends might possess, to discern any differences. The implications of such an ability sent tremors through relationships, as villagers began questioning whether even their most cherished connections were genuine. Reports indicated that this shapeshifter had an almost uncanny understanding of human behavior. It could observe and learn from interactions in real time, adapting its responses based on context and emotional cues. The creature's intelligence appeared to extend beyond mere imitation. It seemed designed to infiltrate social dynamics seamlessly, creating bonds while simultaneously eroding trust. Fears ran rampant as residents began to wonder if they were conversing with their spouse or child, or merely an echo masquerading beneath familiar skin. An unsettling characteristic of this organism was its method of infiltration. Some accounts described sudden changes in personality and demeanor among those who had been mimicked. Residents would notice minor lapses in memory or peculiar shifts in temperament before realizing something was amiss with their loved ones. As these changes accumulated, suspicions grew until friends became strangers right before their eyes. A particularly disturbing aspect noted in government reports involved the organism's ability to reproduce biologically from its victims, embedding itself deeper into the community's fabric by creating offspring that started as replicas. Children who bore no genetic ties yet looked exactly like the original parents. These spawn were often indistinguishable from their biological counterparts, further complicating familial ties and nurturing doubts among those unaware of what lurked beneath their roofs. One report detailed a terrifying incident involving a local couple who reported seeing their neighbor behaving strangely one evening. The couple recounted how they watched as the woman stepped outside her home at dusk only to be met by her husband, who had returned from work earlier than expected. At least that's how it seemed at first glance. As they observed closely from behind drawn curtains, they noted discrepancies. Subtle twitches in his posture and odd inflections in his speech injected unease into what should have been a comfortable reunion. As days turned into weeks after Mabel's death, accounts began surfacing about tests performed by government agents seeking to identify these imposters, among them using techniques aimed at revealing truth hidden beneath layers of deception. The only method believed reliable involved observing reactions under stress. Those who were truly aware of their identities would respond differently under pressure compared to those mimicked by the shapeshifter. However, no conclusive evidence emerged. Fear permeated every interaction as villagers struggled against uncertainty, leaving them exposed like hunted prey lurking beneath shadows cast by dimming lights illuminating Aldergrove streets. Trust became currency too valuable for anyone willing to risk. Conversations grew terse and strained. Laughter faded to whispers laden with suspicion where once flourished friendships dipped under suffocating weight. Paranoia wrought upon them all. As knowledge spread regarding this shape-shifting organism within, whispers shared furtively among neighbors huddled together under starless skies cloaked in dread. They realized they faced an adversary unlike anything imagined, a terror which challenged not only lives but shattered foundational beliefs about identity itself. Who are we if any semblance can vanish overnight? What does it mean when love dissolves, replaced by spectral echoes lurking unseen? Nightmares merge with reality as children hurried past each other, glancing over shoulders, ever watchful for signs lurking behind every corner where friendly faces morphed unexpectedly into something foreign, seeking dominance among them all. A malignant force whose touch lay invisible yet palpable enough, instill fear rippling through veins, coursing like poison, metaphorically strangling essence once held sacred, now desiccated, husks whispering faintly promises once kept, now broken. The residents stood at a crossroads where collective survival hinged precariously against invisible threads weaving paranoia throughout Aldergrove's heart, drawing closer toward unknown depths threatening consume everything resembling safety or sanctuary amid shadows stretching endlessly into darkness. As the tension in Aldergrove escalated, the government agents recognized the urgent need for a reliable method to identify the shape-shifting imposters infiltrating the village. Whispers about a unique test began to circulate among investigators and villagers alike, creating an atmosphere thick with suspense and uncertainty. What was this test, and why had its details remained shrouded in secrecy? The agents working on the case were aware that the only reliable method known to expose these creatures was linked to a physiological response that would betray the imposters. They had encountered fragmented accounts and theories, each more bewildering than the last. Some speculated that the test involved eliciting a strong emotional reaction under stress, a litmus test of sorts that could differentiate between genuine individuals and those mimicking their identities. Yet, as word of the impending test spread among residents, it only fueled their paranoia. Each conversation became laden with suspicion. Families eyed each other warily, unsure if they were addressing their true loved ones or an expertly crafted replica. The community now stood on the precipice of fear, where every interaction was tinged with doubt and every smile concealed potential betrayal. The identity test was rumored to involve a scenario designed to provoke a reaction based on memories unique to individuals. It was said that during this trial, suspects would be confronted with personal memories, details known only to family or very close friends, crafted into a situation where they had to respond appropriately. Those who failed to exhibit genuine recognition or emotional resonance would be identified as imposters. But how could one orchestrate such a test without spiraling deeper into chaos? As the days passed, an air of desperation permeated Eldergrove, with Mabel's death still fresh in their minds and fear festering among them. Villagers began forming groups to discuss the impending identity test. Rumors about how it might unfold took on lives of their own. Some believed it would include an elaborate setup requiring intense psychological manipulation, while others thought it might simply involve asking questions about past shared experiences. In one gathering at the tavern, voices rose in anxious debates about what constituted real memories. What if they know our stories too? One man questioned, his brow furrowed deeply. What if they've studied us? This sentiment resonated with others. They shared stories of odd encounters, instances when family members had failed to recognize them or when something felt just slightly off about their loved ones. Across town, curiosity turned into obsession for some. A group of teenagers decided to take matters into their own hands after hearing tales of potential tests. They decided to enact their own version of identity verification. A makeshift experiment involving friendly gatherings where they would attempt to trick one another into revealing their true selves. These gatherings quickly devolved into chaos as laughter faded and accusations flew. Friendships strained under the pressure of suspicion as they scrutinized every smile and gesture. Meanwhile, government agents were piecing together information gathered from interviews and audio logs. They discovered mentions of previous moments where residents had been caught off guard by people they thought they knew. These accounts pointed toward themes of recognition, or lack thereof, that were crucial in understanding how these shapeshifters operated. One chilling log from an earlier interview involved a woman recalling a moment she spotted her husband outside late at night, only for him to ignore her waves as if he didn't recognize her at all. This incident struck a nerve with investigators. The implications were profound. If these beings could imitate voices and look so closely, what else might they manipulate? The government team began developing methods for implementing the identity tests but faced significant hurdles due to mounting anxiety within the community, adding layers of complexity to any planned approach. Villagers grew restless. Weeks passed without clear communication about when or how this much-anticipated test would take place, leading many to spiral further into paranoia. Then came whispers from within secretive circles hinting at other potential methods for identifying imposters. Some spoke of rituals drawn from ancient folklore. Others suggested deeply personal challenges meant to provoke responses rooted in true identity rather than mimicry. The uncertainty surrounding the nature of this impending identification created an unsettling cocktail of hope mingled with dread. As rumors continued swirling through Eldergrove like smoke from smoldering embers threatening ignite anew against darkened skies above. The villagers remained locked in a precarious stance, balancing between anticipation and fear over what lay ahead. An uncertain fate looming ever closer, promising revelation while threatening collapse. Under shadows cast too long by identities lost among those once held dear, yearning desperately reclaim all that was familiar before fading away. As the shadow of paranoia deepened over Eldergrove, the delicate fabric of trust that had once bound the community together began to unravel. Relationships strained as fear spread like a contagion, infecting every interaction and turning friends into foes. Conversations that were once filled with warmth and laughter grew terse, punctuated by long pauses and lingering glances filled with suspicion. Villagers found themselves caught in a web of uncertainty, unsure of whom they could trust. In the days following Mabel Hartwell's death, hushed conversations flitted from porch to porch, trailing through the streets like whispers on the wind. A palpable tension hung in the air as families began to scrutinize one another's behavior more closely. Neighbors who had shared meals and celebrations now avoided eye contact, each interaction fraught with doubt as memories shifted under scrutiny. "Is this really you?" became an unspoken question lurking beneath polite smiles. The community dynamics deteriorated rapidly. Friendships that had weathered years of joy and sorrow crumbled under the weight of suspicion. Rumors spread about those who had exhibited strange behaviors. People no longer were just neighbors but potential imposters hiding in plain sight. The local tavern, which had once been a hub of camaraderie, transformed into a battleground of accusations where patrons whispered conspiracies over their drinks instead of sharing laughs. During one particularly tense evening at the tavern, a group gathered around the table, their brows furrowed in worry. "I've seen Michael acting differently," remarked Sarah, her voice barely above a whisper. "He forgot our anniversary last week, and when I confronted him about it, he just stared at me like I was speaking another language." Others nodded in agreement, sharing their own unsettling anecdotes of lapses in memory or inexplicable shifts in personality. As these stories accumulated, they formed an atmosphere thick with distrust. Children hurried home before dusk. Parents cautioned them against speaking to neighbors unless necessary. The very essence of community life transformed into a game of survival, one where familiarity turned into danger at every turn. Increased vigilance led some villagers to band together to confront those suspected of being imposters directly. This culminated in clandestine gatherings where residents would observe one another under dim light conditions meant to test reactions against carefully concocted scenarios designed to provoke emotional responses tied to personal history. The practice soon devolved into chaos. Accusations flew as swiftly as fists among those once considered friends. Everyone felt they were fighting for their lives against unseen threats lurking within loved ones. Meanwhile, government agents continued their investigation but struggled against a tide of rising anxiety affecting not only villagers but themselves as well. They witnessed firsthand how fear could warp perceptions and create divisions impossible to mend without clear answers. Even their presence became entwined with suspicion as locals questioned their motives. Were they there to help or simply gather data for experiments? Reports flooded in detailing residents' erratic behaviors, their stories revealing profound shifts in motivations driven solely by fear. Individuals within Eldergrove began taking drastic measures. Some fortified their homes while others sought solace deep within familial ties they believed secure only moments before unraveling dramatically around them. Amidst this chaos emerged a chilling realization. The shape-shifting organisms at play weren't just external threats. They also thrived on sowing discord amongst those who should be bound by love and trust. The real monsters were not solely within corporeal forms but rather manifested through divisions growing wider each day, fueled by paranoia running rampant through streets once brimming with joy.as weeks turned into months without resolution drawing close enough for comfort. A dark cloud settled over Eldergrove. Laughter faded into shadows, suffocating bonds forged throughout years spent together, illuminating paths long walked hand in hand now left awash against loneliness, replaced by unresolved tension weighing heavy hearts down, casting shadows across familiar grounds grown foreign, watching safely from afar, unable reach out, encourage rekindling warmth extinguished so swiftly lost along currents, drifting toward darkness. It became apparent that what lay ahead could either free Eldergrove from its chains or plunge deeper still into despair. The villagers stood at a precipice where survival meant traversing carefully intricate webs tangled between identities lost amidst tumultuous whispers promising revelation, threatening collapse under burdens too great bear alone, yearning collectively salvage remnants, rooted hope flickering dimly yet desperately seeking reclaim unity forged within warmth, beckoning brightly from fading memories, clinging tightly past silently pleading redemption, offered bright light flickering amidst foreboding shadows looming endlessly nearby, waiting patiently draw ever nearer. The investigation into the bizarre events of Eldergrove had unearthed a wealth of unsettling information, but as the government agents sifted through the disparate strands, they were left with more questions than answers. The implications of the leaked file, filled with chilling anecdotes, audio logs, and ominous footage, painted a haunting image of a community nearly overtaken by paranoia. Yet it left many crucial details frustratingly ambiguous. Most pressing was the nature and origin of the shape-shifting organism that had infiltrated their lives, instilling fear in every corner of the village. Residents had become entrenched in a psychological struggle, each interaction fraught with the potential for betrayal. Trust eroded like ancient stone crumbling under constant scrutiny. No one felt safe anymore. Parents whispered to children about staying away from neighbors, aware that even the warmest smiles could conceal monstrous truths. The fear transformed their relationships into a web of speculation and suspicion. Could someone truly be who they appeared to be, or were they merely an echo of their former selves, hiding sinister intentions beneath a comforting exterior? As time pressed on with no resolution in sight, villagers discussed among themselves not just the organism but also what had given rise to such a terrifying entity. Was it born of human malice or something greater? Theories flourished late into the night in flickering candlelight. Some villagers believed the transformation was tied to ancient curses, a punishment for forgotten sins made manifest. Others conjectured it had emerged from a lab experiment gone awry, driven by scientific ambition that had crossed ethical boundaries. In this atmosphere thick with uncertainty, rallied by fears shared among them, some sought solace in ancient texts and folklore to find answers. They gathered in secret at night under the cover of trees illuminated by moonlight, sharing tales where creatures similar to those they now feared had haunted their ancestors. The folklore depicted cautionary tales, monsters who wore human skins yet retained a glimmer of their true natures, lurking just beyond perception. These fables fed their anxiety yet fostered an increasingly zealous determination to root out impostors amongst them. As rumors proliferated and discussions turned frantic about the impending identity test that agents hinted at but had yet to execute, villagers began preparing themselves for confrontation. Tensions reached a boiling point when individuals claiming to have seen relatives act strangely banded together to confront those they suspected. This culminated one fateful evening in an ill-fated assembly meant to unveil any deceit lurking behind facades. The town hall became a makeshift arena where voicing suspicions morphed into accusations hurled like daggers. Friendships ruptured as conversations spiraled into chaos marked by desperation. "You're not who you say you are!" one villager shouted at his brother, his face twisted with hostility and betrayal. The air thickened with antagonism as past grievances revealed themselves alongside fresh wounds opened by mistrust. That evening spiraled toward disaster when a group chose to test its neighbors through provocation, drawing forth memories meant to elicit emotional responses supposedly unique to each person being scrutinized. However, emotions ran high. What began as an effort toward understanding degenerated into an all-out brawl fueled by panic. Voices echoed off walls, mingling arguments and pleas for reason amidst swings thrown not just physically but emotionally as well. That night etched irreparable scars across Eldergrove's already fragile bonds. Through it all, government agents observed from the periphery, aware that chaos was rising faster than they could contain it but powerless against the fear that ruled every resident's heart. They began questioning their own motives. Were they really there to help? Or merely observers documenting this descent into madness? In their efforts to bring clarity amidst turmoil, agents discovered one terrifying truth. The very fabric of human connection was being manipulated by something outside their control. To understand how deeply this shape-shifting organism had infiltrated lives meant confronting painful realizations regarding trust itself. Could humanity recognize when it is becoming alien within unfamiliar skin? Days dragged on with bleakness lingering heavy. In the air, residents locked themselves behind doors while spirits dimmed further, still awaiting assurances of safety that never arrived. Tempting whispers surfacing behind closed lips, taunting minds seeking resolve amidst impenetrable darkness, drawing deeper shadows closer toward consuming everything once cherished, now fragmented beyond repair. The leaked file left readers veiled in uncertainty. The origins of this insidious being remained unexplored while societal structures continued crumbling, painfully under pressures mounting impossibly skyward against disarray surrounding them all. A reminder how deeply an unseen enemy could infiltrate humanity's most sacred bonds without warning, drawing ever nearer while silence settled heavy upon grappling hearts yearning ferociously for understanding even amidst threatening silence looming.